A long time ago, in a land that imagination forgot, in a land covered with mist, on a farmland, there lived a young woman who had been adopted. Now, in Lemuria, that was not a common thing because families prided themselves on staying together, of raising large families, especially in the farmlands. But because of an accident of nature during a storm, this young woman had lost both her parents, her whole family, when she was very young. Now, it happened to be that the villagers had taken her in. And she, for a while, as a child and growing to be an adolescent, she went from family to family until eventually she was old enough to marry. And there was a young smithy who caught her eye. And she caught his eye. And it was a matter of time before they joined in matrimony and started to raise a family of their own. Now, every time that there was a new child born, this woman, Aurora, would find herself feeling a deep sense of loss and a deep sense of grief. And she couldn't understand why, as her family was starting to get bigger, why was she feeling this? So she went to the village shamaness and asked her, this old wise woman who worked with herbs, who worked with the medicine of the soul. Aurora went to this old one and told her her plight and asked for some help. Well, the old woman rummaged through her shelves, for she collected many things. A lot of the villagers paid her with different objects. Sometimes they were things like food, but other times they were things like crystals and stones, things that were valued at that time. And so in a box, stuffed away far in a corner, the old woman brought out this, well, it appeared to be stone, but it was covered in velvet. So although the box was dusty, whatever it was that was inside that velvet, rich, lush velvet cloth seemed to be important. So the old woman shuffled over to Aurora and she gave her this bundle. Well, at first Aurora just held it. She felt the substance of it, the weight of it. And then very slowly she began to pull back that velvety cloth. And there before her was a long crystal staff. It seemed to have spires. It also seemed to have what appeared at first to be a gouge on one side, but actually it was an impression where a crystal had laid once just lightly against it. And now this area was self-healed. Well, Aurora ran her hands in that area, and she could feel the texture, and she could hear a sound like a hum. And she started to hear stories, people's stories. She moved her hand off the crystal, and she looked at the old woman, and the old woman said, "Now, the story staff passes on to you so that you can fill it with the stories and memory of your family. Never again will you be alone and without family. And if you forget just how much family and family love you have, take out the story staff, gently begin to caress it, hear its voice, and let it tell you the stories of your family, the generations that are, the generations that were, and the generations that are yet to come." Well, Aurora was beside herself with excitement, and she thanked this ancient one, this old woman, this wise woman, this shamaness, and she took the crystal very, very gently, covered it back up with its velvety cloth, and she took it home. And whenever there was any kind of moment with any of her children, or with herself, or with her husband, or with her husband's family, she would start to play that staff. She would start to caress its striations and its spires. She would start to move it until she could hear its song, until she could hear the stories. And then she would hold it to her heart and she would flow the story of her family into it. Well, eventually over time, Aurora got very old and she had many great-grandchildren. And the story staff was ripe with stories of her family. And that old shamaness, who had long since passed to the spirit world, was right. She felt the fullness of her family's love and of the love of family, and she knew that never again would she be alone. Now, she wanted this legacy to continue. So she wanted to pass it on to another member of her family, but which one? So in the days to come, she observed various family members, her adult children, her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren, And one day she noticed that her young great-grandson had a particular penchant for sculpting wood. He would find roots and burls, and he would listen to the wood, and he would allow the wood to tell him how it wanted to be sculpted. Now, he was very careful to make sure most of the natural form of the wood remained. So it was a co-creation. As she watched him, she knew that the staff needed to be passed on to him. So as her days here, there, on the earthly plane started to become smaller in number, she called this great-grandson to her, and in her lap was a bundle, something wrapped in a velvety cloth. And she began to tell him the story of how she was lonely and lost her family, and how she felt grief at one time when she first started to have her own children, and how she went to the shamaness, and how the shamaness gifted her the story staff, and how it was filled full, ripened full, of the stories of their family. And in the magic in the telling, she unveiled the story staff, and it seemed to glow. And she placed it in her great-grandson's hands, and he seemed to glow. Now Aurora was at peace and could leave, knowing that the legacy of family love would be passed on generation after generation. And when Aurora passed, there was a great celebration, and each of her adult children, her grandchildren, and her great-grandchildren touched the story staff and flowed a story or a memory of Aurora and the love they felt for her into the story staff. And then when that ritual was complete, her great-grandson took the story staff and placed it on a silver sculpture, a sculpture that had many arms, that reached out to everyone, much in the way that Aurora did her whole life. It was silver, like Aurora's hair. And in the center of it sat the story staff, aglow with the love and light of family. And that is the end of the story. Sa-jen. Hi.